Hello everybody, my name is Benji and welcome to another review video. So it has been a very long time since I did one of these. It's been either a couple of weeks or a couple of months. I really hope that this soundtrack actually fits in the background here. I think it will. I haven't listened to the entire thing the whole way through, so we're gonna go on ahead and hope. I have a very loose script for this, aka I have a bunch of bullet points about things I want to talk about, and then I'm going to ad-lib my elaboration on them. I've got my own gameplay here up on the right from a previous stream of Resident Evil 2, the remake from 2019, I believe it was. And the way that these videos are going to always be structured is, mostly be structured, is I'll do an introduction, and then I will do bad things, good things, and my favorite thing about the game. And then I will wrap up and leave you with your ability to make your own opinion. So without further ado, let's go on ahead and jump into this. This is going to be a lot of me talking with music in the background, so just sit back and enjoy the sound of my lovely voice, even though I don't think I have that lovely of a voice sometimes. Anyway, the bad things that Resident Evil 2 did, which there are not many, honestly. There really are not many complaints that I have about the remake. I never played the original, I never played the remake until just now, so I don't really have a whole ton of complaints when it comes to this game. My first complaint is honestly that there's not enough Mr. X. Like, all of the stuff that I heard about Resident Evil 2 was always Mr. X, Mr. X, Mr. X, Mr. X. He was like the icon of Resident Evil 2. And I feel like it focused more on William, like you're seeing in this boss fight here, than it ever did on Mr. X. And I was really hoping for Mr. X to be a bigger part than he actually was. So I was very disappointed in the fact that Mr. X was not actually, like, a huge deal in the game. And it's just my personal opinion. Obviously, the William fights were great, and we'll get to that in the good section of things that this game did. The second thing that I think was not the greatest was probably the fact that there's not enough variety between Leon A and Claire A. So for anybody who isn't aware, the Resident Evil 2 had different character storylines. So there was the Leon storylines and the Claire storylines. So the Leon storyline, Leon A is Leon as the primary character, and Claire A is Claire as the primary character, and then Leon B is where Leon is playing as the side character in Claire's story, and Claire B is where Claire is playing as the side character in Leon's story. And the Leon A and Leon B have a lot of differences between them, but the Leon A and Claire A, and I'm assuming by extension the Leon B and Claire B, are not very different from one another in the slightest. Like, when I played Claire A and then played Leon B and then went back to play Leon A, it felt exactly like Claire A. Like, almost copy-paste. Exactly like Claire A. Maybe moving like a couple of things around, but mostly it was the exact same. And I was really disappointed by that because I figured 4 storylines would be very different from one another, versus it ended up being just a little too similar for my tastes. The whole Leon A, Leon B thing being different was amazing, and I enjoyed that a lot. But going from Claire A to Leon A, there just wasn't enough variety for me. So that's my second complaint. This next one is probably gonna get met with a lot of, like, feedback and a lot of people saying that I'm just bad at video games, but the challenge modes, like the Fourth Survivor Lone Wolf Military Guy challenge, and the one where you're like that woman trying to escape from the police chief irons, and there's another one that I'm forgetting at the moment. All of those, like, extra fourth character storylines were too difficult. They were too difficult. I would have much rather had them be something that is more of a, you know, the movement mechanics, you know the combat mechanics, and you're gonna put them to a little bit of a test, but you're not going to be absolutely, like, demolished. And I just felt like there were too many enemies. It was just wave upon wave upon wave, and they don't go down in, like, less than 5 hits each, and you don't get extra ammo. You get what you're given at the beginning, and that's about it. And I feel like that was just a little too difficult. And that's the thing that's going to get me a lot of get good scrubs in the comments. But that's okay. I do not brag or pride myself on being good at video games. I, in fact, often say that I am actually very bad at video games, specifically platformers and shooters and stuff. Not so much ability shooters. I'm decent at those. Like, I was very good at Battlefront 2 back in the day. But when it comes to stuff like story mode games like this and other things of that nature, I'm really not great. I excel in different types of games than this, like Satisfactory. So I'm gonna get a lot of get good scrub comments and other things like that, but I think that they're too difficult and they could be, you know, a little bit easier. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have super difficult portions like that in video games. In fact, I think it's quite healthy. But it's a bit of an inconvenience, the fact that you don't get any extra ammo. Like, you have to make every single shot count, and that is very hard in a game where every single enemy takes at least 6 shots to kill. More or less, give or take. And my last complaint is actually about the map variety. So I've been playing a lot of RE3 at the time of recording this video. I played RE3 twice in the past week. My first 2 streams on it, in fact, and it had so much more map variety, so far, at least. Like, there was the part in the actual city itself, then there was a little smidge with Leon in the RPD building, and then there's the section in the hospital, there's a section in the Transformers area with the mutated ticks and such. And there was just a lot more variety to the map, rather than just you're in RPD, and there's a little stint at the hospital, like with Sherry and the kid, and there's a little itty-bitty stint in the, like, underground area with the lab and stuff, which is where my stream is currently playing back at right now. But a lot of it felt super centered in RPD. And that's not a bad thing, because RPD is lovely. It is a lovely map. It is structured super well. We're going to get to that soon. But the fact that it was pretty much only in that area and nowhere else kinda sucked a little bit. And I would have really enjoyed seeing some more stuff like RE3 with the map variety and the different areas and the more open world guided feel to it, rather than you're confined to this area. But that's literally all my complaints. Those are my only complaints. I have nothing else in terms of complaints for RE2. So next up is the good things in the structure here. So the good things include the map size. So I know I just spent a lot of time there complaining about being confined to RPD, but the size of RPD is vast enough and maze-like enough, as well as having, like, the underground sections and stuff like that, where it feels large enough to be a playground. even though you are confined to the playground, it feels like a playground, if that makes sense. And that includes the way of unlocking new paths. There is a lot of backtracking in this game. This game has just backtracking on top of backtracking on top of backtracking on top of backtracking. There is no other way to describe it. It's just backtracking, backtracking, backtracking. You get from one area to the other, and on the way you pass a door that has a clover symbol on it. And then an hour later, you find a clover key, and you're in the opposite corner of the map, and you have to go back to the first corner where the clover key door is, and just retrace your steps, basically. And it does that with the keys, with the different suits or suites. I still don't know what exactly word it is. I don't play cards. The clover, heart, diamond, and club symbol. They do that with the bolt cutters. They do it with the lockpick. They do it with different keys. They do it with key cards and a bunch of other stuff. And they do it with all kinds of different things. And I really, really enjoyed that. In addition to that, there's the puzzles. And some of the puzzles unlock different areas and such. And that makes you feel like a genius. It really makes you feel like a genius. Whenever you find something in one area of the building and you're like, oh, this looks like it needs some sort of wheel to spin the door open. And then a couple of hours later, you end up finding a little wheel that you can go and be like, hey, I thought I needed a wheel earlier. Go back to that area, put a wheel in, turn it, open the door, and keep progressing. And it makes you feel like an absolute genius. And I love it. The song's very loud. So that's great. It has a wonderful inventory management system. The fact that certain items take up 2 spaces and you need to rotate things and stack them correctly in order to make them fit. And other things of that nature, and the progression of as you get through the game, your inventory gets slightly larger with every single piece that you find, and the fact that that's even optional, like you might not be able to find those and not get the maximum inventory by the end of the game, is a really, really nice touch. Everybody knows, I get very, very excited whenever I finally come across more inventory. I'm just like, inventory space, woohoo! That's what I've been waiting for. Let's go! Love it, love it, love it. Next up is the enemy AI and resilience factor. I know I complained earlier with the whole fourth survivor thing about you have to use 6 shots to kill every enemy. And that's not a bad thing whenever it's a couple of enemies. But when it's like 50 enemies in the fourth survivor, that's when it gets bad. If it's 3 zombies in a hallway that each take like 6 shots to kill, that's not bad. That's perfectly fine. And the resilience makes it feel more realistic. The resilience of the zombies and the resilience of Mr. X and of the lickers is all very, very good, in my opinion. I liked the fact that it took multiple shots to get a zombie staggered, it takes multiple shots to get a zombie downed, and then when you round the corner a couple of minutes later, the zombie is, boop, all of a sudden, right back up again. I really, really enjoyed that whole system of things. And that always makes you on edge whenever you're going through and you get the headshot and the zombie goes down and you're ready to go, and then you walk past them and they get back up again. You're always going to think that the zombie that you just downed in the last room, when you walk back, could get back up again. And it puts you on edge and gives you this really, really nice atmosphere for the entirety of the game. In addition to that, the fact that you never know when a licker is going to appear. Like, you'll go to a new room, and you initially will walk everywhere. just in case there happens to be a liquor in that area. You don't want to take your chances and run, because if a liquor is there and you could have walked, you just instantly screwed yourself for the rest of that room. You either have to kill it, or it will always know that you're going to be there. And that's a really, really good thing. In addition to the liquor's omnipotence area, is Mr. X hunting you down the entire time. If you shoot a zombie in the police station, he will hear it, and he will come right for you. He will come for you wherever you want. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, he will find you. I'm coming, Mr. X, as one might say. As Heckley would say, I'm coming, Ada, except I'm coming, Mr. X. Simple as. So I loved the fact that Mr. X is always hunting you down. Always put me on edge. It was great. Loved it. The next thing is the graphics. So the textures are really good. I did play on PS4, so little less quality than it probably would have been on my PC with the Radeon RX 570. But PS4 still wasn't bad in the long run, as you can see. It's not that bad. Load times were pretty bad, though. Load times on my SSD for Resident Evil 3 is way better than it was on PlayStation. But that's more of a hardware thing than it is a game thing. That's not the game's fault, that's the PlayStation 4's fault, so that's okay. But the zombies, especially, the blood covering them, everything about it, really, with the zombies, was pretty ridiculous. Pretty ridiculous. And there's one very specific scene at the sort of beginning of the game where the zombie bites out the cop's jugular in the freezer in the little supermarket area. Is so graphic and violent and just catches you off guard. And I really liked that section because that kept going. Like, there's another part in the game where a cop gets ripped in half and you see the intestines. And there are other parts of the game where you blow off zombies' limbs or heads, or Mr. X bashes your skull in, or other things of that nature. And it is just very graphic. And I love games that do body horror and graphic giblets and stuff just like that. I love it. It makes things so good. It makes things so more scary and realistic and immersive and just fun overall. So props to you, RE2 and RE3 so far for that as well, but RE3 will have its own video once we complete it. Next up is the progression with the fight scenes. So the progression, obviously, the guns that you get more powerful and get more upgrades over time. The flashbangs and grenades and stuff that you get also get more powerful over time and more frequent over time. The heals that you get fewer and farther between over time, so you need to stock up on them in the beginning of the game and not use them unless you need them. And then the progression of the fights themselves. So in Claire A, you fight William, I think it's 4 times. You fight him once when he's still, like, mostly human, and then you fight him at the end where he's, like, you know, a behemoth. I think it's 4 fights overall. And then the 5th happens in Leon B, which is what is currently playing on the screen. That results in the meat train. And you also get the Mr. X encounters, where the first encounter you, like, blow him up and he regenerates and stuff, and then this encounter he's got, like, a massive meat arm and you have to hit him with a rocket launcher, and it's crazy, and you're about to see that part. But I feel like the progression of the enemies, and specifically of the bosses, fits very, very well with the progression of the weapons. As you get more and more powerful weapons, you need to use the more and more powerful weapons on the more and more powerful enemies. Such as right here, I've got the upgraded shotgun, I've got the Desert Eagle, I've got the flamethrower, I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I use to take out the second hardest boss in RE2, other than, I guess Meat Train could technically be considered one of the harder ones in RE2, at least in my opinion. The Nemesis fights in RE3 have been way more challenging than the RE2 fights ever were. That's not a bad thing. That just happens with progression of game development and stuff like that, of course. Enemy variety was good as well, speaking of progression. So there are a couple of different enemies in the game. There's the zombies, which we've talked about, the lickers that we've talked about a little bit, that I've kind of touched on, the blind ones with the big long tongues, and then Fedora Man, aka Mr. X, being another one. And then there were also the alphas with the, like, poison parasite stuff down in the sewers. So I feel like as you get more and more upgraded weapons, as well as the bosses going up in that tier, the enemy placement also went up in that tier. So the enemy placement of Mr. X, or lickers, or zombies, or alphas, ended up being very proportional to the ammo that was in the area, the resources that were in the area, and last but not least, the weapons that you were getting in the area. So you're gonna get, like, the shotgun near something that would require a shotgun to take down, like a licker or an alpha or something along those lines. And I'm pretty sure you get the deagle, the Desert Eagle, in the sewers where you've got the alphas to take care of and a whole bunch of other stuff of that nature. So that was just, it was perfect placement. It was perfect placement. And the last thing that I want to talk about that was really good was the pacing of the game overall. So between the two storylines, I did 5 streams, varying from different types of hours, different amounts of hours. Some of them were 2 hours, some of them were 3, some of them were 5, some of them were longer than others, some of them weren't as long as others, and all in all, it felt like a really good timed game. Like, it didn't take too long, and it wasn't too short, and it had plenty of content, and it lasted pretty much like as long as I needed it to last. If that makes any sense at all. I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. You never want a game to be like 8 hours and you feel unfulfilled, and you never want a game to be like too long to the point where you spend like 60 hours and you feel like you haven't gotten anything done whatsoever. And this game was a nice happy medium. It was probably 12, 15-ish hours that I spent on the game, so not too short. And I felt very fulfilled the entire time. I always felt like I was making progress, unless I got, like, stuck on a puzzle or something, or stuck on a boss fight. Like you can see, I'm having issues right now versus Fedora Man himself, who does not have a fedora because I shot it off of his head earlier. But if I wasn't getting stuck, I was just always making progress. I always felt like I was making progress, at least. So the game was very good in that regard. Hey, look, a rocket launcher. Speak of the rocket launcher and everything of that nature. So that's everything I really wanted to talk about. So this video is actually going to be shorter than I thought. My overall opinion on Resident Evil is, or Resident Evil 2 specifically, is that it was a very good game. Entirely worth the purchase. I believe I got it for a discount, but I don't remember for sure. But it was entirely worth the purchase. I would have been fine buying it at full $15, $20 price. It was worth every cent that I spent on it, every hour that I spent on it, every moment that I spent on this game. I felt like I was... See, there's the graphics I was talking about earlier. That is insane. That is insanely realistic. It's great. What was I talking about? Yeah, I never felt like I was ever in a pinch here. Also, ignore this thing that's about to happen here. Yeah, ignore that. I wasn't expecting to show that there in the review video, but oopsie. Oh well. Oh well, it's fine. I really enjoyed this game. I loved it a lot. If I had to give it like an out of 10 scoring, I would probably say that it was a... I didn't think about this part. I would say it's an 8 out of 10 because it's not entirely my style of video or my style of like game. It's not something that I would have ended up picking up on my own, just because it's not something that is super duper intriguing to me. It's not my genre necessarily, the whole horror shooter thing. But I'm very glad that it was suggested, I'm very glad that I picked it up, and I'm very glad that I gave it a chance. And I was very, very pleased with how it ended up at the end. So there you have it. 8 out of 10 for Resident Evil, maybe an 8.5 out of 10, in all honesty. Many, many good things talked about, not very many bad things, very minor bad things at that. The Last of Us 2 got a much more critical review. So the next video that's going to come out is also going to come out today, and that is going to be the Satisfactory recap with the nuclear power, and it's a little longer than this one. But that is all I have for you wonderful people for now and so far. So thank you everybody so much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed the Resident Evil 2 review. I know I certainly enjoyed the game, so once again I'm very glad that I ended up picking up. But without further ado, adios, sayonara, au revoir, hasta la vista, das vidania, auf Wiedersehen, ciao, and goodbye. Have yourselves a wonderful night, and I will leave you off with a tiny glimpse of the meat train. We love the meat train. So have a good one, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later. There's the meat train. That was a little jank. Sorry. Have a good one, y'all.